Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. So today we're going to take another look at the PowKiddy X18S. Now I've already done a review on this device, as well as a hardware mods video to improve some of the controls as well. Well, today we're going to take a look at the software. There is a new version of LineageOS that is available in a beta release for this device, and so we're going to install it on this device today and then take a look at how it performs in terms of emulation performance and all that. On top of that, I'm going to take a look at the new PlayStation 2 emulator available for Android, so we'll see how that all plays out on the PowKiddy X18S as well. Now, after we've made all these improvements to the device, I'm still not convinced that this is a perfect retro handheld. For example, it costs about $170, but once you add the hardware pieces to it and then pay $10 for the software, you're looking at about $210. And so that's a factor to consider, the fact that it is going to cost a little bit more to improve this device. And it's a little bit annoying that that wasn't available first time around. It's a little bit unfortunate that as an owner of a device, you have to purchase it knowing that you're going to have to get inside of it to fix it, both on the software and the hardware perspective. So in that case, I'm not really sure that the PowKiddy X18S is the perfect device for everybody, but for the people who are interested in it, people who like the clamshell design, and also people who are not afraid to tinker a little bit, this might be a good fit. Either way, let's just jump into the software updates and let me show you what it can do. Okay, so the developer behind the LineageOS and the X18S is named Black Seraph, and he keeps the beta releases of his firmwares behind a Patreon page, and I think this is a really good example of developers making sure they're getting paid for the work they put in. And once you become a patron, you then have access to everything. And this is what it'll look like once you've signed up. You basically just go to the most recent version of the beta release of PowKiddy X18S LineageOS. And the firmware is divided amongst a bunch of different zipped files, so download every single one that you find in the most recent post. It'll take a minute to download them, and you'll see them all like this. What you want to do is open up the first one using something like WinRAR or 7-zip. What it'll do is it'll comb through all those different zipped files and create one big extract. After that, you can delete the archive files, and then maybe refresh your page in Windows Explorer, and there you go. This is everything here. Now each release comes with its own README file, so in this video we're basically just going to walk through that process. I'm going to go pretty quickly through it just because the entire written instructions are right here and they're very simple. But long story short, just make sure you follow these written instructions to a T. First thing you want to do is temporarily disable the Windows Defender firewall. To do this, just open up the Windows Start menu, type in the word Windows Defender, and then on the left of the Windows Defender settings, they'll have an option to turn off everything. And just set this to off and then hit OK. And you're more than welcome to turn this back on once we're done with this process. Next, we're going to install some drivers that will be necessary to recognize the PowKiddy X18S. You'll find these under Binaries, then Windows, and then Drivers. And obviously, if you're using Linux or Mac, follow those instructions instead. Now under Windows 10, there should be something that says Driver Setup. All you have to do is just run this executable, which will install the drivers. Now we're ready to plug in our X18S, make sure it's powered on and ready to go. And now in the main folder, you'll find a file called x18stool.exe. And I'm telling you, this process is amazing. He created his own executable file to install this operating system. When it comes to an Android-based operating system, you really just can't beat this experience. Anyway, once you're plugged in and you have that exe tool running, you're going to want to go back onto your device, open up the About Game device under the Settings menu, and then press the build number 7 times so it turns you into a developer. After that, just back out and go into the System Settings, and then Advanced, and then you'll find Developer Options. Within here, there are 2 settings we need to switch. One is called OEM Unlocking, just go ahead and turn that one on. And then a little bit further down, you'll find one that says USB Debugging. Turn this one on as well. And then it'll ask if it's okay to connect to the computer. Just go ahead and check that block and then tap Enable. From here, it's going to reset the operating system and revert it back to an older version. And what it'll ask you to do is press the volume down button in order to start the process. So once it prompts you on the device itself, just go ahead and press the volume down. Now it's going to wipe your internal storage, and then it'll reboot the system. And from there, you'll be greeted like you did when you first bought a PowKiddy X18S. You don't really need to do anything during this setup. You don't even need to connect to Wi-Fi. All you really need to do is just get to the main menu. So don't sign into your Google account or set up anything else. After that, go into the Settings section, and then on the far right, you'll find the Advanced Settings. And then same thing here, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, select About This Device. Then down at the bottom, we're going to tap that build number a bunch of times till we're a developer. Then we'll go into Advanced Settings, Developer Options. And then here we want to turn on USB debugging again. And believe it or not, we're almost done installing LineageOS. At this point, it's going to wipe the device again, and it's going to run through the flashing of LineageOS. This will take several minutes, so just be patient as it runs through the process. If at any point you run into any issues, then look at the README file. They have all sorts of options and workarounds in case you run into any issues. I didn't during my installation, but if you do, again, check that README file. Okay, and so here we are, we're in LineageOS, which is just a really trimmed down version of Android. Now from here, you just want to set it up like you would any other device. You know, pick your Wi-Fi and set up your location services if you want, things like that. Personally, I like to turn most of these features off. Now, if you want, you can just start using this right away, but the thing is, it doesn't come with the Google Play Store app, and I find that to be really convenient when I have it. So we're going to install that next. So first thing we're going to do is install the Magisk app. Just tap on it here. It's going to ask you if you want to upgrade and install. Just hit OK, and then go through the prompts that allows it to install itself. It'll take a second, and then when you open it up, it's going to ask you to reboot the device. Just hit OK, and at that point, it'll reboot the PowKiddy X18S. Next, we want to get a terminal app, and the easiest way to do that is to go through the web browser. So we're going to open up the browser here, and then I'm going to type in a URL that I got from the README file. If I haven't made it clear enough, make sure that you grab everything you need out of the README file itself, because if there are any changes in the future, the README files are going to get updated, unlike this video. Okay, so once I've typed in that address, it's going to direct me directly to an APK file, which I'm going to download. And then you can check your downloads here at the top menu, and then you can see when it's completed. And then once it's done, go ahead and install the Termux app. And like anything, you're going to have to go through a bunch of prompts to get there. But there we go. Now we have Magisk up and running as well as Termux. So now open up Magisk and then press that little puzzle button on the bottom right. And here's going to be a bunch of different binaries and repos that you can install. We're going to want to install one specific one here called Magisk Hide Props Config. My understanding is this app is going to allow you to make the device think it's something other than the X18S in order to install other things. Either way, just go ahead and install this, and then it'll ask you to reboot when you're done. And it'll take a minute to reboot, but when it's done rebooting, we're actually going to go into the terminal app. Now here I'm going to type in a series of prompts that again I got from the README file. So I'm going to breeze through this pretty quickly, but all you really need to do is open up the on-screen keyboard, then type in the prompts and any of the confirmations that are required. And each of these codes mean different things. You know, one of them is to give away your firstborn child. Another one is to change the name of your pet dog. Whatever, just go through what's in the README file and you'll be fine. Now, once all this is complete, it's going to reboot one more time. And now is a good time to grab all of our Google apps. And these we can find through a GitHub page, which you'll find in the README file. There are 3 different options here: stock, basic, and core apps. And at first I wasn't sure which one I wanted to install, so I decided to check up on it a little bit and see what apps are included. Now the stock apps has everything that would come with a typical Android phone. And I'm not going to use most of these apps, so I don't think stock's going to be a good fit. And the basic one is very basic. It really only has a couple different apps, and it doesn't include the Google Play Store. So just like with Goldilocks, the third one's the best. This is the core one, and it has Google Play Store and a couple other things. And so this is the one that I'm going to install on my device here. So just go up to that download section, pick the core file, and then download the most recent version. You can save it wherever you want on your computer, and then connect your device via USB and then turn on the file sharing within the top menu. That'll allow you to access the internal storage. And then all I'm going to do is move over that core Google Apps file. You can put it wherever you want. I'm going to put it in the downloads folder. That just makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, we're just about done at this point. Let's go back into the Magisk app here. And then we're going to press that puzzle piece one more time. And then up top, it's going to say install from storage. And then right here under recent files, it shows those core Google Apps files. So I'm just going to click on that. And just like that, it's going to install the Google Play Store app and a couple other ones that I probably don't need. It'll take a minute to run through the process, but when it's done, you just need to reboot your device. And sure enough, when we reboot this time, you can find the Google Play Store. From there, you can sign into your Google account and start downloading your files. But before you do that, let's sort out the storage options. Now you have 2 different options when it comes to formatting your SD card, and I'll run you through those 2 real quick. You can either use it as extra phone storage, or you can use it for portable storage. Portable storage will allow you to take the SD card out and put it in your computer and transfer files that way. But the phone storage option will basically expand the internal storage, and it'll make it a lot easier when it comes to Android 11 permissions. I've tried both options, and both have their advantages and disadvantages, but personally I like to use the phone storage option, especially for Android 11. It makes it so that every app is going to be able to find your files. But that does mean you will have to transfer files via USB, which will be a little bit slower. Anyway, once you've got your storage sorted out, you can go into the Google Play Store and start downloading some apps. And so this is what my current layout looks like. I'm using the ATV Launcher Pro to make these nice little icons here, and then I have all of my apps. RetroArch for all of the retro games, Dolphin MMJR for GameCube, the new Aether SX2 for PS2, and then I have the PSP emulator, Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, and then I also use DuckStation for PS1. You could run these in RetroArch, but I like having the standalone one. You also have Nintendo DS, Sega Saturn, and then I always love to play Horizon Chase, so I always install that too. In terms of streaming, I have Stadia, Moonlight for my PC streaming, and then Xbox for cloud gaming as well as to access my own Xbox, PS Play for my PS4 remote play, and then obviously the Google Play Store app, and then a file manager and my settings menu. I keep it really basic on my device. So let's run through most of these apps and see how they perform. We're going to start with RetroArch, and here I only have a few classic systems installed so far. Really, this is just a test case to make sure that everything's working okay. I found that when it comes to the X18S, I prefer to turn on a run ahead of 1 under the latency settings in RetroArch. It just makes the controls a little bit more responsive, and the extra juice in this device allows you to do that very smoothly. When it comes to gameplay, actually Game Boy Advance seems to be one of my favorites to play on this device. Because it's a 3:2 aspect ratio handheld, it just looks really good on this 16:9 screen. When it comes to PS1, like I said, I use the DuckStation standalone emulator, and I usually upscale it to a 3x resolution or a 720p. And that's exactly what the PowKiddy X18S screen resolution is, so this is a really good fit. In general, when I'm using emulation, I try to keep things at a max 720p, that way I'm not overworking the CPU when I don't need to. Either way, PS1 looks really great at 720p. Moving right along, the Nintendo 64 emulator can also upscale to a 720p resolution, and it looks fantastic. Here I am with F-Zero X running at 720p, 60 frames per second with 0 frame skip or any issues. And look at all these things that are happening on the screen and 0 slowdown. Even the hardest games to emulate on the Nintendo 64, like Cruisin' USA, runs perfectly even at 720p. When it comes to Dreamcast, I prefer to use the Redream emulator. It doesn't have a 720p output, but it does have a 960p output. And it really doesn't matter, because even at 960p, every single game plays at 60 frames per second solid. As much as I like to complain about the controls on this device, to be honest, the hardware plus the screen are a really good match. This is a very powerful console, and at 5 inches, this display is perfectly suited for 720p gameplay. I find this screen to be perfectly saturated, and I do think that the brightness is really well tweaked. It isn't perfect under direct sunlight, but everywhere else it really shines. Moving on to PSP, 3x resolution, which is a 720p output, also runs really well with just about every game. Here we are with Outrun 2006, it's running beautifully at 3x. I'm comfortable in saying that at least 95% of games are going to run at 3x resolution, and the ones that won't will probably run really well at 2x resolution. Here's God of War Chains of Olympus running at 2x resolution with 0 frame skip, and it's running beautifully. It does dip down to something like 58 frames per second every once in a while, but honestly, it's really smooth. Alright, stepping it up a notch, let's go over to GameCube. This is the MMJR emulator running at a native resolution here. And I have gone into the options and changed a couple different settings. And if you're interested in figuring out how to make most of this work, I would recommend checking out the channel Jim RPG. He just did a recent video showing off a couple different setting changes that he did for his X18S, and he got really good results. And so honestly, I watched that, got some good tips, and then just used that on my own device, and they worked really well. So I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. Thanks, Jim, for making that video. Anyway, for the most part, 2D games are going to play really well. Some 3D games are going to have issues, and you will need to tweak some of the settings. But overall, I would say with LineageOS plus Dolphin MMJR, you're going to get about 50% of GameCube games playing relatively well. If you mainly want to focus on 2D or role-playing games, things like that, you're actually probably going to have a really good time with GameCube games. One other trick I recommend is that when you grab ROMs, make sure that you grab the European ones, which can run at 50 frames per second. All the games that you see running here in this video are the PAL versions, which run at a max 50 frames per second. That really helps with some of the performance. Of course, if you're a stickler for 60 frames per second, then you're probably looking at the wrong device. You probably need to get a much more powerful Snapdragon phone. Either way, GameCube performance is a lot better than I found in my initial review now that I have LineageOS and I've tweaked some of these settings. But of course, it's not perfect. Metroid Prime is a really good example of that. It constantly dips down to about 40 frames per second, which is about a 20% dip in performance. And so this one I feel is right at the cusp of being acceptably slow. I wouldn't recommend playing Metroid Prime on this device, but if you're really desperate to play it and you don't mind a bunch of hiccups along the way, then maybe this will be a pretty good fit for you. For me, it's just a bit too slow. Okay, moving on to PlayStation 2, this is the new Aether SX2 emulator. This app came out 2 days before the release of this video here, so it's brand new, but it's working really well, it's free, and it's open source. This is a really amazing app. In my initial review, I didn't even test PS2 because I didn't want to use the shady apps that were available at the time. And honestly, I'm glad that I waited because this has been worth the wait. As you can see here, Final Fantasy X runs really well. Now, to be fair, I've done a lot of tweaks to make this performance work well, and I basically just used the video from Taki Udon, which I'll also have in the video description. And so for many games, I've thrown every hack that I can in order to make it perform adequately. But overall, I would say many games are performing really well. Final Fantasy X is a really good example. And I would say the flagship game, the one that works the best on this device, is actually going to be Kingdom Hearts. This game can play with a capped frame rate, which means that it'll stay at a stable 60 frames per second, and it's just a joy to play. And so if you're a big Kingdom Hearts fan, I would say that you can comfortably play this game on this device. Moving up to other games here, here's Grand Theft Auto 3. Now this one's running fairly well. It is definitely got some slowdown going on, especially in some of the more busy areas. But I was surprised that an open world game like this played at all, and honestly, it's pretty smooth. And I remember playing Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PS2 back in the day, and it also used to bog down in certain areas too. But all in all, I would say that Grand Theft Auto 3 is mostly playable. It's actually pretty fun. Now, one of my other favorite games for the PS2 is Jak and Daxter, and this one plays okay. It has a lot of graphical glitches, and the gameplay can slow down quite a lot when you're playing. With enough tweaks, you can get it running at a pretty stable frame rate, but all the same, the graphics are pretty crappy, and it's just not a lot of fun. And unfortunately, Ratchet & Clank is even worse on this device. This is just a hard game to emulate in the first place, and anytime you're in one of these open worlds like this, it's just going to bog down a lot. So unfortunately, some of these bigger 3D games, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper, they're going to have issues. Same thing with God of War. This one crawls no matter what you do. But let's be honest, God of War 1 was not a lot of fun. There were a lot of those dumb walking challenges where you had to walk across planks and not fall over. I hated that stuff. And on top of that, you probably haven't finished Chains of Olympus anyway, so maybe just go play that on the PSP because it works really well on this device anyway. Okay, let's switch things up and move over to streaming. So here is Stadia running on this device, and it runs amazingly well. I'm here in Hawaii where we have a really bad connection, but even then, Rise of the Tomb Raider, as you can see here, was running beautifully. This was actually a really exciting moment for me. So if you're into PC streaming like Stadia or even Moonlight, this is going to be a great device for that. On top of that, you can do remote play or cloud gaming with Xbox, as you see here with Doom Eternal. It's also running really well, and it looks good on this screen. Now, unfortunately, this device doesn't have L3 and R3 buttons, but this version of LineageOS has found a fix for that. And to trigger it, you basically move over one of your analog sticks at least 20%, and then you press the select button for L3 or the start button for R3. So as you see here, I'm moving and then pressing start, and it's making a melee. And so right here, I need to press R3 in order to open up this contraption, and as you see, I'm going to move my analog stick and then press start. So it's not a perfect setup, but at least it's functional, and it's pretty ingenious of the developer to come up with this hotkey. Okay, last thing I want to show off is the HDMI output. Now this is another thing that was improved with LineageOS. It works really well. The output is going to be 720p, so even if you plug it into something higher, that's the max you're going to see, but either way it runs really well. So if you wanted to plug this device into your TV and then use it as a functioning mini console, you could. You could actually even take a couple Bluetooth controllers and then connect them to this device, and all of a sudden you're playing Kingdom Hearts on your TV on a tiny little device that costs under $200 retail. So yeah, I would say all in all, with this new LineageOS operating system, the HDMI out works really well. And so have I changed my mind about the PowKiddy X18S? And I would say, a little bit. I do think that if you're willing to take the time and improve the hardware and then flash this new operating system, you're going to be in for a treat. This is a pretty good device once you have it all set up, but it is going to take a few days of work. And even then, it's not perfect. I still think these controls could still be improved a little bit. But either way, this is still, price per performance, a really good value. And so if you think you might like this device, then yeah, go for it. But if you're interested in something that's a little bit more hands-off, then I would wait for something like the Retroid Pocket 2, the Anbernic RG552, or the upcoming AYN Odin. Either way, it's pretty cool that we have these options coming in the near future. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. And we will see you next time. Happy gaming.